I still remember the exact moment my life flipped upside down. I was sitting in my room, scrolling lazily through my phone, when my sister burst in, her usual mischievous grin plastered across her face. "Guess what I've decided?" she chirped. I looked up, half interested, expecting another one of her harmless pranks. But the way her eyes sparkled told me this was different. "You're going to become me. For a week." I blinked. "Wait, what? Excuse me?" I whispered, thinking I'd misheard. She laughed, twirling around in her pink dress, her hair perfectly curled. "You're going to live my life. Wear my clothes, my makeup, my everything. 1 week. Every detail." My stomach sank. I had always admired her confidence, her effortless style, the way she could walk into a room and own it. But me? The thought of transforming into her. It felt like stepping into someone else's skin, someone flawless, someone untouchable. She handed me a bag, my first taste of what was to come. Inside were dresses, skirts, blouses, heels, accessories, and a makeup kit that made my pulse race. I stared at it, my hands trembling. I can't," I stammered. "Why would you even?" She waved me off. "No excuses. You're doing it. It's fun. I promise." Fun. My heart raced, my palms sweated. This wasn't fun. This was terrifying. The first night, I tried to apply her makeup. Foundation smeared unevenly across my cheeks, blush streaked like fire across my face, and the eyeliner. Oh God, the eyeliner. One poke and my eyelid stung, leaving a blotchy mess. I looked in the mirror, horrified. Who is this? It wasn't me. It wasn't even her. It was some grotesque hybrid, a version of me that shouldn't exist. Panic mingled with curiosity. Could I really pull this off? Could I survive a week as someone else's shadow? The first day at school, or rather, outside my room, was a nightmare. My sister's friends noticed immediately. Whispers, stares, giggles followed me down the hall. "You look weird," someone muttered under their breath. My cheeks burned. I tried to mimic her walk, her smile, even her laugh, but it felt forced, unnatural. Every glance at a reflective surface made me flinch. That girl in the mirror wasn't me, but I had to pretend she was. My heart pounded with anxiety and shame. At home, things weren't any easier. My parents, seeing me in my sister's clothes and makeup, were confused. "Is this a costume?" my mom asked, her voice hesitant. My dad didn't even hide his curiosity, raising an eyebrow, and I felt like a fool standing there in a tight pink dress and heels that made my legs wobble. The house, once familiar and safe, suddenly felt like a stage, and I was trapped under the spotlight. Even ordinary tasks became humiliating. Eating lunch without smudging lipstick felt impossible. Walking down the street meant navigating the stares of strangers, many of whom mistook me for my sister. Every step, every gesture, every word required hyper-awareness. Fear, embarrassment, and confusion wrapped around me like chains. Why did I let her do this? I thought, heart pounding. Why am I even here? Nights became my only refuge. Alone in my room, I started experimenting. Dresses, skirts, blouses, I tried to make them fit my body, adjusting, pinning, tucking. Shoes that once seemed torturous became small victories with each step I learned to master. Makeup, once my enemy, slowly became a tool. I discovered subtlety in blending, precision in eyeliner, confidence in a bold lipstick. The mirror no longer reflected a mistake, it reflected potential. I also practiced mimicking her mannerisms. The tilt of her head, the sway of her hips, the playful flick of her hair. At first, every movement felt unnatural, a parody. But gradually, something strange happened. I started to feel familiar with it. A spark of curiosity flickered in my chest. Could this version of me, her shadow twin, actually exist? Could I inhabit her world without losing myself completely? The nights stretched into hours of trial and error. I filmed myself in secret, replayed each video, critiqued every gesture, every smile, every line of dialogue. And each time, I noticed small victories. My hand gliding more naturally, my voice softening convincingly, my posture improving. Fear still lingered, but curiosity, excitement, even a touch of pride began to creep in. The weekend brought my first real test, stepping outside, fully dressed as her, into a world that didn't know the truth. I wore her favorite floral dress, heels clicking on the sidewalk, hair curled to perfection, makeup flawless, or as flawless as I could manage. My heartbeat thundered in my chest as I navigated the park, hyper-aware of every gaze, every whisper. But then it happened. A stranger smiled. Not in mockery, not in judgment, just genuine recognition of my effort, of my confidence. That tiny interaction was electrifying. A surge of exhilaration coursed through me. I was no longer hiding, I was performing. Performing fearlessly, and slowly realizing that performance carried its own power. I began to experiment more openly. Small gestures, playful expressions, subtle tweaks to my voice. Each small victory built confidence, blending excitement with anxiety into a heady mix I couldn't resist. The next few days were a whirlwind of growth. School, social outings, even family dinners became arenas for self-discovery. I learned to navigate conversations with her friends without betraying my nervousness. I discovered the thrill of commanding attention in a subtle way, the power of presence, the delicate art of charm. And with each passing day, the reflection in the mirror became less a stranger and more a version of me I hadn't known existed. But growth came with tension. My sister noticed my increasing comfort. One afternoon, she cornered me in the bathroom, smirking. "You're getting too good at this," she teased. My stomach flipped. Was I overstepping? Losing myself? Or was I finally mastering the persona she had thrust upon me? Her eyes twinkled, almost approving, and I realized I didn't need her approval to continue. I had claimed this space for myself. Then came the ultimate challenge, a family gathering where I had to interact with relatives who had known me my whole life. My chest pounded as I walked in, heels clicking, dress flowing, hair perfectly styled. Whispers circled immediately. "Wow, you look different," my aunt whispered, barely concealing a smile. My heart raced. Panic threatened, but I took a deep breath, straightened my posture, and embraced her presence fully. That night, I realized something profound. The challenge was never about my sister. It was about me. About fear, courage, curiosity, and the capacity to transform myself. I had become more than a shadow. I had become a version of myself I could embrace. The final days of the week were the most exhilarating. I experimented boldly, striking outfits, dramatic makeup, daring hairstyles. Each reflection, each public interaction, each small victory cemented the realization that transformation wasn't just cosmetic. It was psychological, emotional, even spiritual. I was learning about power, identity, and the thrill of self-expression. One evening, alone in my room, I looked at the reflection in the mirror. Smooth skin, soft curls, bold lips, confident posture. I traced the lines of my face, smiled softly, and whispered, "I did it. I survived. I became more than I imagined." The reflection stared back, no longer a stranger, no longer my sister's shadow. Me. Fully. Confident. Empowered. The final moment came when my sister returned from a night out. She looked at me, eyes wide, and laughed softly. "You actually pulled it off," she admitted, a hint of awe in her voice. I smiled, shrugging, feeling an unfamiliar pride swell in my chest. I had stepped into someone else's life, faced fear, and emerged not just intact, but stronger, bolder, and more self-assured than ever. Life didn't immediately return to normal, but I had changed. Confidence seeped into every aspect of my being, how I walked, how I spoke, how I carried myself. Family, friends, and even strangers noticed. I discovered that fear and curiosity, when harnessed, could be powerful tools of transformation. Makeup, clothing, posture, these were not mere surface changes. They were gateways to self-expression, courage, and empowerment. I even began experimenting beyond my sister's influence, blending my own style with hers, creating a persona uniquely mine. I had learned the value of patience, practice, and boldness. I had faced embarrassment, navigated anxiety, and discovered a version of myself that was fearless, expressive, and unapologetically alive. Now, when I look in the mirror, I see more than makeup, more than a dress, more than a hairstyle. I see resilience. I see courage. I see a person who dared to step into someone else's world and emerged fully, authentically herself. That week, which began as a challenge and a joke, became a journey of self-discovery, empowerment, and transformation. If you're watching this and feel trapped by fear, doubt, or expectation, remember this: transformation is possible. Courage isn't the absence of fear, it's choosing to act in spite of it. Embrace curiosity, dare to experiment, and step boldly into the unknown. I became my sister's shadow twin. And in doing so, I found myself bold, confident, unapologetically me. By the time the second week began, the transformation had taken on a life of its own. What started as a forced dare from my sister was no longer just about mimicking her. It was evolving into something far more personal. Every morning, I woke up with a mix of anticipation and dread. I knew I would be facing a mirror that reflected someone I barely recognized. But somehow, each glance pulled me closer to a strange, exhilarating version of myself. I had mastered the basics, her favorite dresses, the perfect eyeliner flick, even the subtle arch of her eyebrows. But now, I wanted to push boundaries. I experimented with hairstyles I had once thought impossible. Intricate braids, high ponytails, even daring curls that bounced around my shoulders. Makeup became a form of art. I explored bold lip colors, smoky eyes, and the delicate play of blush and contour. Each new look felt like discovering a superpower I didn't know I had. The public exposure intensified everything. My sister insisted I accompany her to school events, social gatherings, even casual outings, fully dressed as her. My heart raced the moment we stepped outside. Every passerby's glance felt amplified, every whisper a test of courage. At first, I stumbled, my steps unsure, my voice quivering, but gradually, I found a rhythm. I could walk, talk, laugh, and smile convincingly. People mistook me for my sister, and I began to enjoy it. That thrill of being noticed, of commanding attention while hiding in plain sight, was intoxicating. At school, her friends began to interact with me naturally, sometimes laughing at jokes I barely understood, sometimes complimenting my appearance. One friend leaned in and whispered, "You're actually really good at this." My chest tightened. Good at pretending? Or was it something else? Deep down, I felt a spark of pride. I had started to own the persona, even if it wasn't entirely mine yet. Home life became its own challenge. My parents, initially confused, began to play along, commenting on how much I looked like your sister or teasing me about my perfect curls. My little brother, always brutally honest, simply stared and said, "You're different." And that was true, I was different. Not just in appearance, but in how I carried myself. Confidence, poise, subtle grace, it was all creeping into me, whether I wanted it or not. The turning point came one Saturday afternoon when my sister dragged me to the mall. I wore one of her most daring dresses, fitted, floral, with a hemline that made my legs feel both exposed and powerful. Heels clicked against the polished floor as we walked, and I felt every pair of eyes on me. My palms sweated, my stomach flipped, but there was also exhilaration. A stranger approached us, a teenage girl who smiled brightly. "Your hair and makeup are perfect. How do you do it?" My pulse quickened. "Me? Perfect." I stammered for a moment, then laughed, brushing back a curl. "Practice," I admitted, realizing that I wasn't just performing anymore. I was inspiring, even in a tiny way. The rush of validation, mixed with the fear of exposure, was addictive. From that day on, I began experimenting more boldly in public. Subtle gestures, the way I laughed, even the cadence of my voice, I refined everything. Each small victory reinforced my confidence, and the anxiety that had gripped me during the first week began to transform into exhilaration. I was no longer hiding behind my sister. I was stepping into a persona that felt alive, thrilling, and unexpectedly mine. But the journey wasn't without conflict. My sister noticed the changes and teased me relentlessly. "Careful, you're getting too good at this," she said one evening, her eyes twinkling. "Soon you'll be better than me." I laughed, though a flicker of doubt surfaced. Was I losing myself in this persona? Was I becoming someone else entirely? I retreated to my room, staring at the reflection in the mirror. The reflection wasn't fully her, and it wasn't fully me. It was a blend, a hybrid I hadn't expected. And then it clicked, that's the point. Transformation isn't about imitation, it's about discovery. I had taken a challenge imposed on me and made it my own. Each brush stroke, each outfit, each practiced gesture was a choice, a declaration of autonomy. The climax came unexpectedly at a family gathering. I had to interact with relatives who had known me my whole life, fully dressed in one of my sister's boldest outfits, makeup precise, hair perfectly styled. I felt a surge of panic as whispers and surprised glances circled the room. My heart pounded, my stomach lurched, but I straightened my posture, lifted my chin, and moved with intention. Conversations flowed. Compliments landed. Eyes lingered. And for the first time, I realized something incredible. I wasn't just surviving the experience, I was thriving. The fear, the embarrassment, the awkwardness, they were still there, but they had been transformed into something else: presence, power, and confidence. My sister noticed too, and for the first time, I saw pride in her eyes. "You really became me," she admitted softly. The last few days of the challenge were exhilarating. I experimented boldly: dramatic makeup, daring outfits, refined gestures. I had claimed the persona fully, but I also discovered a deeper truth. This wasn't just about my sister anymore. It was about me. About embracing fear, pushing boundaries, discovering confidence, and stepping fully into a version of myself I never knew existed. Alone in my room, I looked at the reflection that had terrified me at first. Smooth skin, bold lips, confident posture, subtle playfulness in my eyes. I traced the contours of my face, smiled softly, and whispered, "I did it. I survived. I became more than I imagined." That reflection was no longer a stranger or a shadow, it was me. Strong, empowered, confident, and unapologetically alive. Life after the challenge didn't revert to normal, it evolved. Confidence seeped into every aspect of my being. I walked taller, spoke with poise, carried myself with subtle elegance. Friends and family noticed. Strangers, too. Even small interactions, casual conversations, carried the weight of someone who had faced fear and emerged victorious. The experience taught me more than makeup or clothes ever could. I learned the value of courage, curiosity, persistence, and self-expression. I discovered that transformation isn't just external, it's deeply internal, shaping how you perceive yourself and how the world perceives you. Now, when I look in the mirror, I see more than a reflection. I see resilience. I see confidence. I see someone who dared to step into the unknown, embrace fear, and emerge authentically herself. I became my sister's shadow twin, and in doing so, I found myself. Bold. Confident. Radiant. Unapologetically. Me.